So Gauteng thinks that the answer to the latest round of taxi violence is building its own Uber. Today we're unpacking the plans for a state-run e-hailing app, the final collapse of Mango Airlines, and Eskom's solar gamble that could change how big businesses buy power. And be sure to stick around for the Wildcard, where we retrace this messy Durban invention that went from sugarcane fields to a global food icon. My friends, if you're enjoying the show, be sure to like and subscribe to help us grow. And now, without further ado, let's get into it. So most South Africans know the backdrop, these periodic flare-ups of violence between taxis and e-hailing drivers that leave many commuters anxious and the industry on edge. I mean, just last week, a 27-year-old e-hailing driver was shot and burnt alive at Maponya Mall in Soweto, a killing that police suspect was linked to taxi turf wars, and which sparked protests that ended up shutting down the mall the very next day. And so when the Transport MEC stepped up to speak, many expected a plan to confront the violence head-on. Instead, she briefly condemned their attack before making a very different announcement: a Gautrain-backed e-hailing app. She argued that existing e-hailing services are, and I'm quoting this, notorious for not being safe, and that a state-run version could bring more accountability and jobs. So understandably, many critics say that the priorities felt upside down, that the real danger isn't the likes of Uber, but these lawless turf battles over routes and permits. They point out that you don't see Bolt drivers torching taxis, yet it's e-hailing apps that got painted as a problem here. And so for many, the timing made this move sound tone deaf. I mean, in the wake of a driver's murder, the province's big announcement was to launch its own state-run e-hailing service. So after 4 years in business rescue, Mango Airlines has finally run out of runway. You see, the low-cost carrier famous for its orange planes will now be wound down after its last potential buyer, Ubuntu Air, pulled out of the rescue plan. So just to jog your memory, Mango entered business rescue back in 2021 when its parent company SAA was itself fighting for survival. And so the idea was pretty simple: find a private investor, restructure the debt, and get the airline flying again. But this process dragged on into endless delays, from court challenges by angry creditors to a government bailout that only partially landed. And so by the time Ubuntu was ready to move, there was no planes left, no routes, and no staff, just the Mango name and 382 million rand in cash. And so, unsurprisingly, Ubuntu walked away. So the business rescue practitioners said that a structured wind down will at least give creditors more sense on the rand than a flat-out liquidation. But for many South Africans hoping for cheaper flights, this is another door closed. Mango will not be coming back, and sadly, domestic airfare prices will stay where they are. Eskom says it's finally ready to sell sunshine. The utility has launched its first renewable energy offtake program, which essentially lets big businesses buy solar power directly from Eskom-powered sites. Now, in practice, that means 291 megawatts of solar capacity up for grabs through these long-term contracts, anywhere from 5 years to 25 years. Now, the first projects will only switch on by 2027, but for many local manufacturers under pressure to cut carbon, securing green power now could be a lifeline. So on paper, this is a pivot. Eskom's been built on coal, but it is promising a mix of renewables, gas, nuclear, storage, even green hydrogen by 2040. CEO Dan Modikane says that this is how Eskom plans to be sustainable and competitive, and not just a load-shedding fire brigade. So now the irony here is that while pushing this whole green transition, Eskom is still in court trying to block private rivals from selling electricity. So critics are arguing that you can't claim to embrace reform while fighting to protect a monopoly. So in short, it seems that Eskom wants more solar in the grid, but as long as it's stamped with its logo. And before we cruise on to our Bagel Bite of the day, here's a couple other headlines worth knowing. For starters, magistrates are ironically dragging Ramaphosa to court for a 34% pay hike, arguing that their capped 1.16 million rand salaries undermine judicial independence. Now, Treasury's 740 billion rand wage bill is already straining, and a ruling here could trigger knock-on raises across government. MTN's share price plunged 10% after weak South African revenues, management shakeups, and US probes into legacy dealings in Iran and Afghanistan. Nigeria now out-earns the local unit, raising questions about the group's home market future. And to all the motorheads out there, Lamborghini's just unveiled the Fenomeno, its most extreme car yet. Just 30 will be built, packing a 6.5-litre V12 hybrid that pushes 795 kilowatts, 0 to 100 in 2.4 seconds, and a top speed past 350 k's an hour. And on to our Bagel Bite of the day. Let's see what you got. The question is, which two countries share the world's longest international border? Is it A, Canada and the United States, B, Kazakhstan and Russia, or C, Argentina and Chile? Bonus points if you can guess the length to the closest 1,000 kilometers. And on to our wildcard section. Most South Africans have tasted a bunny chow at some point in their life, but very few know how this messy, curry-stuffed loaf was actually born out of necessity. So in the late 19th and early 20th century, thousands of Indian laborers were brought to Durban to work on the sugarcane plantations. And by the 1940s, they faced this practical problem, which was long days in the fields, short breaks, and no easy way to carry their curry for lunch. Rotis broke apart, metal tins were scarce, and so the fix was ingenious. Hollow out a cheap loaf of white bread, fill it with curry, and you had a meal that doubled as its own container. Other stories circle the dish with their own spin. One credits Indian golf caddies at the Royal Durban Golf Course. Another points to the apartheid laws that barred people of color from sitting in restaurants, forcing them to order from side doors and making food on the run a way of life. Now, either way, Durban is home to the bunny chow. And so, to all the Durbanites out there, the question must be asked. Where can we find the best bunny chow? And as for that Bagel Bite, the answer is Canada and the United States, with a rather peculiar border that stretches 8,891 kilometers. So to put that in perspective, Africa from north to south is about 8,000 kilometers, which means that this border is actually longer than the entire length of our continent. And my friends, that's it for today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hope you guys are all having a great week. Be kind to one another, and I'll catch you all tomorrow for the next round of the good stuff. Cheers.